Hello, welcome everybody. Welcome to creating a nature-based planetary safety system. My name is Femi OK. This conversation will live on the Nature for Life Hub, and it's part of a series labeled Global Ambition. So you know what you're about to hear will be some really big ideas, some really challenging concepts. And I am bringing the leaders, the inspirers, the thought leaders to help us work out a framework for biodiversity that will get us into the future and really take care of our planet and our world. We're going to be looking back at the last 10 years of biodiversity action, looking forward to the next 10 years of biodiversity action in about the next, 1 hour and 15 minutes. We are going to have conversation and illustration. I know you're leaning forward and saying, say what? Yes, I did say illustration. We do not want you for 1 minute to leave the screen, which is why we very sneakily put Eleanor Beer into our program. Hello, Eleanor. Tell everybody what you're going to be doing today for us.
Hello, can you hear me, Femke?
I hear you beautifully. Hi, Eleanor.
Just checking. Yes, so today I'm going to be listening in to the key messages and drawing what's going on. So you'll be able to see that throughout the broadcast and at the end as well.
All right. How do you even start to do that, Eleanor? What thoughts go through your mind? How do you turn those big thought ideas into actual illustrations? What's your plan?
Fly, because the inspiration comes to me as I'm listening. So I think visually, and as I hear the messages, they appear in my mind. And luckily, I'm just able to translate that with my hands onto the screen.
All right, Eleanor, I'm really looking forward to this. As you can see, we started with a clean slate, blank piece of paper, digital piece of paper, and we'll be checking in on Eleanor to see how she does. Thanks, Eleanor. Looking forward to that. I would love you to say hello to Elizabeth Mrema. She's the Executive Secretary of the CBD. She's in great demand right now. She's such a rock star. Elizabeth, hi. Welcome. It is so good to see you, Elizabeth. We are just going to unmute you so you look and you sound as good as you look. Elizabeth,
yes.
When people say, hi, Elizabeth Mrema, what do you do? What do you tell them?
Good question, Femi. When I'm asked, it depends who asks me. If my grandchildren ask, I always say, I protect nature. Just go outside. Look at the trees. Look at the grass. Look at the plants. That's what I'm busy doing. But when I talk to you and others, then I will get more technical and talk, you know the kind of food diet you choose? You know where it comes from that farm, wherever it is, by the time it reaches to the shop, how much waste goes out, and you go and buy and look at a red, smooth tomato or apple, which is glittering, how much waste has gone behind it, how much land has been increased for unsustainable agricultural production for the food you eat. Have you thought about that? So that will be kind of conversation if I'm talking to adults, and basically to resonate what they eat and choose day to day and where it comes, how it is transported to the shops, to them buying, to their kitchen.
For the CBD, for all of us who care about biodiversity and the future of biodiversity on our planet, this month could be an historical month, a historical year. It could be. What is your mood right now, Elizabeth?
From the last few days, even earlier this morning, my mood is high. The last few weeks, the mood had gone down. Why? The last few weeks, we had launched our Global Biodiversity Report. Worldwide, WWF also launched their Living Report. And the recent reports, we can go to IPBS, the news were not good at all. But the news from these reports, this is what we are hearing from the leaders in the last few days. Pledges over 60, commitments, really, that now we know We can no longer go back to the business as usual. The COVID has been a stark reminder that relationship with nature and human actions are inseparable, interdependent, and we need to look at our nature. And therefore, from the leaders have had commitments, really political will coming in, really pronouncements of actions to take place from now. We can no longer wait for tomorrow. I mean, the biodiversity has been declining at unprecedented rates, pressures driving the ecosystems to the peaking points, that this even threatens the achievements of sustainable development goals and even undermine addressing actions on climate change. So really inspiring to hear the leaders on the pledges ready to act, really inspiring to even hear from the business leaders ready to take part, ready to act. But the business need the governments to create that enabling environment, policies in place, regulations in place. I mean, for them to be able to also play. And therefore, at the end of the day, we need global solidarity, multilateralism, for everybody to play a role.
My heart rate has gone up, Elizabeth. You're rallying this session. We are so ready for this session. I am going to get you to take some time, watch this session, and then come back at the end, because we need this energy. We need this energy to close up the session. Thank you, Elizabeth Mrema. She's the Executive Secretary of the CBD, getting our heart rate up. We have a biodiversity crisis, which is why we are all here, which is why we are focused on the future. What you're about to hear right now is our failing report card, but it's not all a D or an F, depending how bad as students we've been over the last decade or so. There is some hope. I want you to hear from Ms. Ana Maria Hernandez. She's the chair of the Intergovernment Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, followed by Sir Robert Watson, the head of Scientific Advisory Group for UNEP Global Assessments Synthesis Report. You know, they're important scientists because their titles are extremely long. Let's hear from them now.
Last year, the IPBES Global Assessment on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, as you know, made headlines around the world with news that 1 million species of plants and animals are at risk of extinction, many within decades. The IPBES report also said, firstly, that many vital contributions from nature to people have decreased rapidly, such as, for example, the capacity of ecosystems to regulate our climate or pollinate our crops and protect us from extreme weather. Secondly, no one of the 20 Aichi biodiversity targets will be achieved by the deadline this year. And thirdly, it is not too late, and we know what needs to be done. That includes acting on the direct causes of biodiversity loss, and in particular, on sustainable agriculture, overfishing, climate change, and pollution. But importantly, acting on the underlying causes of biodiversity loss, which relate to our economic models, our institutions and governance, and ultimately to our values and behaviors. This report makes it clear that with the current negative trends on biodiversity, most of the sustainable development goals, such as zero hunger, good health, and climate action, will not be reached unless transformative changes are made now to reverse these trends. Science has spoken, and nobody can ever again say that they did not know. So in this post-2020 era, it will be more crucial than ever to rely on scientific evidence to inform our policies, our decisions and actions, to take the big leaps needed to more sustainable pathways. So thank you very much.
UNEP has engaged a group of experts to synthesize the findings of all recent major global environmental assessments. Their report will be released in January, just prior to the UNEA meeting. We are faced with a biodiversity, climate, and chemicals and waste crises, and each of these issues are intertwined. Biodiversity, which is critically important to human well-being, can only be conserved and restored if we simultaneously tackle all environmental and development issues together. The good news is we know what it takes to crack the planetary crisis. We need to identify and implement policies and technologies that can help achieve the SDGs while simultaneously addressing the environmental issues. Cost-effective and socially acceptable solutions exist. All stakeholders need to play their part: governments, private sector, the science community, and the public. We need to transform our economic and financing systems by including natural capital accounting in decision-making, eliminate environmentally damaging energy and agricultural subsidies, and stimulate sustainable production and consumption. We need to transform our food and agricultural systems. We can no longer convert natural habitats, and we need to employ sustainable agricultural practices. We must also reduce food waste and strive for a healthy, balanced diet. We need to address climate change. Governments need to significantly strengthen their pledges under the Paris Agreement, because current pledges will not limit climate change to less than 2 degrees centigrade and will put us on a pathway to 3 to 4 centigrade, which would be a disaster for biodiversity and humanity. Transitioning to a low carbon economy and limiting deforestation are both critical and doable. Time is not on our side. We need to act now.
Thank you, Sir Robert Watson. The reports that you hear our various speakers mention, if you go for the Learning to Life website, you will find them underneath this session. You can click on them as resources, you can find them, you can study them. So that gives you a little bit of background as well, in addition to the speakers' comments. So we have a problem. We have a major problem right now. We have a planetary emergency, and we also have a climate breakdown. What you hear from our speakers, two things. This is our problem. We're in trouble. But here are the solutions. Not just complaining, but also the suggestions, which is exactly what Dr. Manfella Ramfelli, who is the co-president of the Club Rome, and Mr. Dominic Warre, managing director at the World Economic Forum. Problem and solutions. Let's take a look.
There is no doubt that parliamentary emergencies are upon us. Look at the fires in California and those in Australia before them. We've got droughts and floods, including in my own country, South Africa. It is time for us to take the emergency actions that are needed for us to be able to emerge from these emergencies. We need new lifestyles that are more regenerative and enhancing of the well-being of people and the planet. It is time for us to change and be the people that will shape the future for our children and grandchildren.
Global gross domestic product, GDP, has quadrupled since 1970, enabling immense progress and lifting billions of people out of poverty. However, material productivity, which is defined as GDP relative to material and energy inputs, has actually stagnated since the turn of this century, tying any increase in our economic growth to an equivalent increase in resource extraction. So we need a reset of humanity's relationship with nature. In fact, we need a global reset of how we eat, live, grow, build, and power our economies. The World Economic Forum's latest report on the future of nature and business estimates that a net zero, nature-positive economy can actually create $10.1 trillion worth of annual business value, and importantly, 395 million jobs by 2030. Conversely, if we continue to lose nature at current rates, where nearly 1 million species are at the risk of extinction, we actually lose economic competitiveness. More than half of the world's GDP is moderately or highly dependent on risks from nature loss. So we are living amid a planetary emergency. We really need leading businesses and governments around the world to look for creativity and ambition to catalyze this change agenda. What is required is a radical transformation in our food, urbanization, and energy systems. The World Economic Forum stands committed through its initiatives like Champions for Nature and the Net Zero Greenhouse Gas Emissions Challenge. Nature really is everyone's business.
I am so stealing that. Nature really is everyone's business. Creating a nature-based planetary safety net. Where are women in this framework? Here's Karen Kemper.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. COVID-19 has destroyed lives, livelihoods, and economies. It has also laid bare the consequences of underinvestment in green, blue, and clean growth. The current crisis threatens to reverse development gains we've made in recent years and, according to World Bank preliminary estimates, has driven as many as 100 million people back into extreme poverty. This crisis could be a harbinger of new crises. Emerging results from our ongoing research on the nexus between nature and the economy show several risks: the wild pollinator collapse, widespread conversion of tropical forests to other land uses, and marine fisheries collapse. These could seriously jeopardize the world's poorest countries' prospects for moving out of poverty. Under these scenarios, sub-Saharan Africa, particularly reliant on forestry and pollination, could see a 26% reduction in real GDP growth. The World Bank expects that the level of spending required to recover from COVID-19 will be larger than at any time since World War II. How we invest recovery financing will have repercussions for decades to come. Beyond the immediate health crisis, the World Bank is supporting countries to design economic recovery packages that aim to rebuild better. These packages integrate longer-term sustainability considerations, such as nature-based solutions that boost the economy and simultaneously deliver positive environmental, health, and social outcomes. Sustainability, inclusion, and resilience must be at the core of stimulus and recovery plans. This means doing more than getting economies back on their feet. Recovery policies must also trigger investment and behavior changes that will reduce the likelihood of future shocks, increase society's resilience to them when they occur, and avoid inequality. For example, the restoration of forests and landscapes can create jobs for local communities while also protecting biodiversity and ecosystem services like soil health that underpin economic prosperity and resilience to shocks like pandemics. At the World Bank, we remain committed to reducing poverty, and we see investing in nature as critical to improve livelihoods and decrease inequality while building resilience to crises. We look forward to continuing working with all of you on this most vital agenda.
Thank you so much, Karen Kemper. Karen Kemper, Global Director of Environment, Natural Resources and Blue Economy at the World Bank. That is such a great job. So we are talking about inequality as we're looking forward to building a stronger, better, more sustainable biodiversity future for us around the world. Inequality means that we're looking at the gender gap, okay? Where are women lagging behind and how can they help achieve our aims? So our next speaker really brings that home beautifully in a very short amount of time. Mina Salami is the founder of Miss Afropolitan blog. You should follow that blog. It is an excellent one. Mina, over to you. Mina will be joining us shortly. I am going to tell you for now that you're in the Nature for Life Hub. We are looking at creating a nature-based planetary safety net, talking about inequality, and Mina is our next speaker. Mina, take it away. She just wants me to say her name 3 times. Mina, you're stalling. All right. I'm going to move on because I'm not sure if I'm going to get Mina to join us, because I really would love to do that. So we're going to get Mina to stand by, and this is a really good time for us to check in on Eleanor Beer. Eleanor, do you remember Eleanor Beer? Eleanor was right at the top of our show. She is illustrating, she is visualizing our conversation, our session. So how does she see what it means to create I am typing and talking at the same time. I am typing behind the scenes. Where is Mina? Is she ready? She is stalling for her big entrance. So Eleanor Beer is illustrating our entire session, which is amazing. And I said to Eleanor a little bit earlier, Eleanor, can I talk to you? And she's like, Femi, I am concentrating. This is not an easy thing to do. I am an artist. You cannot be talking to me as I'm creating great art. Right, Eleanor?
Sorry, I'm just really busy at the moment, Femi, so, you know, you're going to have to wait.
All right.
I'm getting there.
Yeah, you're getting there. So what Eleanor told me was that between what she hears and she sees, there's about 10-minute lag.
Yeah.
So 10 minutes after this session, she's going to be finished. But every time I say something, every time a guest pops up, there's an idea and she writes it down. And I am slowing her down immensely. So I should stop talking to her. But don't you love the fact that our ideas, our thoughts, this framework for biodiversity, the thought leaders that we're going to have, they're all going to end up on Eleanor Beer's page there. And we're going to see more of that in just a moment. All right. Third time lucky, and then I'm giving up. Mina Salami is the founder of the Miss Afropolitan blog. I've introduced her 3 times. Third time is a charm. Dun, 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 dun. What is going to happen next? Meanwhile, Eleanor continues to scribe there for us. I'm Femi Okay. I'm your host for this session. Are we going to get Mina? Do you think we will? This could be multiple choice. You can actually tweet me at FemiOK anytime, and you can tell me. You can place bets on whether we're actually going to see Mina. I'm going to move on. Mina, I'm so sorry. I have said your name so many times. That's fantastic. And I'm told we'll come back to you later. Very sneaky, Mina. Actually trying to get me to talk about your blog so many times. All right, we are going to move to the path to recovery, not my personal recovery, but the universe's recovery. We want to hear some reasons for hope and success. These stories are really important. And I'm going to start with a video that I love. It's from the CBD. It will raise you up. It is so exciting, so beautiful. Let's roll the video. Wow. Even on our little computer screens, that looks epic. In the past decade, so much progress countries have been able to do, which is what you saw in that video, but that is not the whole story. And we're going to get a reality check from CBD COP presidents, past and future. Let's have a listen.
Greetings. My name is Mina Salami, and I am a writer, a lecturer, and a feminist theorist. It is a great honor to be able to contribute to this seminal and important conversation at the Nature for Life Hub. Thank you very much. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to jump straight into the point. Feminism is a necessary force when it comes to the climate crisis. Feminists have been fighting to protect our environment, our biodiversity, Mother Earth for decades. We have long identified that there is a two-faced monster that is causing these problems. On the one hand, there is a patriarchal system which exploits our coexistence. And on the other hand, there's an economic system which exploits the non-human natural world for resources in order to promote overconsumption. This is not viable. And we need to join forces. We need to work together, and we need to include diverse voices, diverse women's voices, so that we can all together Greetings. My name is Mina Salami, and I am a writer, a lecturer, and a feminist theorist.
So, everybody, we have heard Mina more than once. She's been interviewed 3 times, and then you saw her again. This is going to work out beautifully in the edit. Thank you, Mina. Finally. And we got a double helping of you too. All right, so where was I? That video of the last 10 years of what has been achieved by countries was so beautiful, so breathtaking, but he doesn't tell the full story. I want you to get a reality check from the CBD COP presidents, past and future. Let's take a look.
When the world came together in Nagoya, Japan in 2010, we knew we were facing a biodiversity crisis. By gathering wisdom and efforts, we finally agreed on the important documents guiding us to work towards biodiversity conservation, the Strategic Plan for Biodiversity with the 2050 Vision, Living in Harmony with Nature, the Aichi Biodiversity Targets, and the Nagoya Protocol. However, the GBO5, recently published by the CBD, showed us the harsh reality. The international community has failed to meet fully any of the targets. It showed us that we need to join together as one and work harder to achieve the 2050 vision. I would like to stress the necessity of redesigning our socioeconomic system for a more sustainable and resilient world. Redesign requires 3 transitions as its foundation: the transition to a decarbonized society, a circular economy, and a decentralized society. These transitions are also relevant to the 2050 vision. Japan is determined to make positive contribution to both the development and the implementation of the post-2020 global biodiversity framework by leveraging our experience as the COP10 presidency and sharing the lessons learned from initiatives of international cooperation, such as the Japan Biodiversity Fund and the Satoyama Initiative. Let us work together towards realizing a world of living in harmony with nature. Thank you. Arigato.
In 2012, the world came together in Hyderabad, India, We recognize the importance of working not only across governments, but also across other global conventions. We recognize the interdependence between nature, gender, climate change, and poverty. And we agreed that nature is essential for the well-being of all.
In 2014, the world came together in Pyeongchang, Korea. We understood that one of the biggest barriers to biodiversity on action was mobilizing resources. By constructing the Pyeongchang Roadmap, we agreed to double the amount of finance from industrialized nations to developing countries. We also launched 4 initiatives to foster capacity building and technical and scientific cooperation, namely the BioBridge Initiative, the Forest Ecosystem Restoration Initiative, the Sustainable Ocean Initiative, and the Peace and Biodiversity Dialogue Initiative.
In 2018, the world came to Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. We envisioned scenarios for 2050, and we realized that the only viable scenario is to bend the curve of nature loss and restore our planet. We discussed the different consequences of the biodiversity loss, especially on health and food security, and also those consequences upon Africa. And from that point, we realized that we all need to build an action agenda, a strong action agenda for the next 2 years for the people and for the safety of our planet.
As we end this new decade for action, we invite you to join us in calling for ambitious, realistic, and balanced targets for the next decade, in calling for transformation in business and finance, in catalyzing local action on nature everywhere. We stand at the crossroads of the next decade. The decisions we take now, next year, and over the next 10 years will reverberate throughout this century and beyond. Please join us in standing for nature and for life.
You're watching Creating a Nature-Based Planetary Safety Net. I'm Femi OK. I'm your host for the next 45 minutes or so. One of the things that I wanted to share with you, success stories. For those, we go to 2 countries, the United Kingdom and to Finland. Take a look.
Biodiversity loss is a tragedy in and of itself, but it is also a tragedy for humans, and it is invariably the poorest people who suffer the most when the services that nature provides begin to fail. The UK is taking action to help turn things around, and as president of COP26, we will make the case at every opportunity. At home, we became the first major economy to legislate for net zero, ending the UK's contribution to global warming by 2050. Our new Environment Bill will require government to set legally binding environmental targets, including for biodiversity. Our Nature Recovery Network is an expanding and increasingly connected network of places that are richer in wildlife, support the recovery of our species, and are more resilient to climate change. We are radically shifting our land use subsidies to support rather than undermine nature. And the UK is taking action to protect the marine environment too, with 357 marine protected areas protecting a quarter of UK waters. Through our overseas territories, we're stewards of some of the most spectacular warm water reefs in the world. And I'm proud that we are on track to deliver over 4 million square kilometres of protected ocean in that area through the Blue Belt programme, and we've secured funding to expand that scheme further still. In addition, we are designing a new £500 million Blue Planet Fund financed from the UK's ODA budget, which will help eligible countries protect their marine environments from the key human-generated threats, climate change, marine pollution, overfishing, illegal fishing, and habitat loss. And that's not all. Having committed to doubling our climate finance to £11.6 billion, we are investing significant funds in nature-based solutions, including a £100 million biodiverse landscapes fund, funding to tackle the illegal wildlife trade, and significant uplifts both to the world-renowned Darwin Initiative, which supports vulnerable species and habitats, and also Darwin Plus, which protects uniquely valuable environments in and around our overseas territories. As part of our commitment to an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework to be adopted at COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity, we are leading the Global Ocean Alliance of countries advocating for a new target to protect at least 30% of the global ocean in marine protected areas by 2030, the 30 by 30 target. We played an active role in crafting the Leaders' Pledge for Nature, a call to arms for greatly increased global action to tackle the twin crises of climate change and biodiversity loss. And we're taking action to tackle the main drivers of deforestation globally by making sure the commodities that we consume are not grown at the expense of forests. Now, we know, of course, that much more needs to be done by us and by other countries. And so we hope that we can come together in the 2021 super year for nature and take steps that match the scale of the crisis. We have a duty to act now on behalf of nature and on behalf of every generation to come.
Finland underlines the importance of a whole government approach to promote biodiversity, conservation, restoration, and sustainable use. National biodiversity strategies and action plans are key for mainstreaming biodiversity in the society. The scientific evidence is clear. There are success stories in biodiversity conservation, but more is required to halt the biodiversity loss. Digital solutions and investing in people's knowledge and skills are pivotal for biodiversity. The role of the private sector and stakeholders in broadening the knowledge of biodiversity and new forms of cooperation is important in the work for the transformative change and mainstreaming. In Finland, we have made 2 scientific assessments on the effectiveness of implementation of the Convention of Biological Diversity. These results are really important in the way forward on how we are going to implement the convention. We have been including indigenous people, academia, all ministries and all stakeholders in my country for this work. We have been continuing this work since 1995, therefore I can tell you we will continue and the implementation post-2020 will be a success. I'm sure about that.
Look at that smile and confidence from Finland there. You were just listening to Marina van Weissenberg. She's a CBD focal point. And then a little bit before that, the United Kingdom's Minister of Environment, Lord Zach Goldsmith. So you heard from governments and you heard their list of this is what we've done. This is what we're doing. Very proud of their success stories. Now let's look at the communities down on the ground, local communities and the stories that they want you to know about. Let's take a look. We have 3 panels today, and we are bringing you exceptional leaders who are helping us work out how do we have a biodiversity framework that is going to succeed. And the first panel, we are going to government ministers. So we're going to be talking to the Minister of Environment and Natural Resources for El Salvador, the Secretary for the Minister of International Development and Cooperation in Sweden, and also the Minister of Environment and Climate Change for the Government of Finland. Ministers, you are very welcome. It is great to see you. Let us start with Finland. If you were going to humble brag, Minister, what would you tell us about in this session as we are trying to create this nature-based planetary safety net? What is Finland doing right now?
Like we have heard, the state of nature is alarming. So it's very important that we are acting now. We all know that we are totally dependent on nature, so we need to make sure that we take care of our biodiversity. So in Finland, we want to act the whole government together. It's not only the protection of nature, even though that's very important as well. We need to protect our forests, we need to protect our swamps and wetlands, and we need to also management our protecting areas to make sure that the biodiversity it has is not declining. But it's even more important that we take care of the biodiversity, whatever we are doing. And especially if we think about the forestry, agriculture, mining, construction, we need to make sure that we are acting so in that way that we take care of the biodiversity and we are acting on the boundary of our planet. So it's not only the question of the environmental ministers, it's the question of the whole society and all the sectors. And that's what I want to emphasize, that it's not only about the protection of nature, even though it's very important, and we also need to restore the nature more and more. But it's the most important is that we take care of the biodiversity, whatever we are doing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Minister. Let me just bring in the Minister for El Salvador, the Minister for Environment for El Salvador. It's good to have you. Minister Lariana, if you were going to say these are the goalposts, these are the guiding tenets by which we are working in El Salvador to create greater biodiversity, what would you share with us? Minister Fernandez Lopez Lariana, you can unmute yourself, reveal yourself, join our conversation. We're just waiting for the minister to join us. While I'm doing that, I will tell you that we are having a government leaders session here where we're trying to work out and using their examples from their different countries about how do we achieve our framework for biodiversity. How are countries doing that? Minister Laliana, are you there? I'm going to move on. Come back to the minister, if that's at all possible. The Secretary of State to the Minister for the International Development Cooperation, Ministry for Foreign Affairs, Mr. Per Olsen Thrid. Let's see. Microphone on, video on. Oh,
yes.
I already have hope just by seeing you.
Great.
Your
Wonderful.
vision.
Great to see you.
Having seen you in vision, your vision. As you look ahead, what examples can you share with us that may help other countries, other regions?
Well, thank you, Femi. I think one has to start with just looking at the world today. We face multiple and parallel crises. I mean, the pandemic it's definitely a global health crisis, but it brings with it socioeconomic crisis, a humanitarian crisis with increased food insecurity. We see a human rights crisis. And we see already before a climate crisis and loss of biodiversity. I mean, we have 50 million people being pushed out in extreme poverty now, and more than 1 million species in the risk of extinction. So, I mean, this is the world we face. But to be State Secretary for Development Cooperation, International Partnerships, and the Sustainable Development Goals, this is of course challenging. But hey, every challenge comes with an opportunity. And I think the opportunity right now is such that we are facing and learning through the pandemic that a healthy planet means also healthy people. Investing in ecosystems mean investing in people's livelihoods. Nature-based solutions means empowering and give power to local communities. Economic recovery has to be fossil-free recovery. And fighting climate change means equipping the planet with resilience. You know, investing in biodiversity means investing in humanity. And so many before me today have said that. So Sweden has put biodiversity in the center, both on land and below water, in the center of our Building Back Better approach and as a priority in our development cooperation, as it is also catalytic for us for us to work and reach also the other objectives in the Sustainable Development Goals. So biodiversity not as a single issue by itself, but as a catalyst to also reach other development goals. We do this in our bilateral cooperation with a number of partner countries around the world, but also trying to program regional and international projects with a biodiversity and ecosystem link. So the last decade, we've been able to increase our funding in the biodiversity agenda with more than 250%. But I think one of our biggest learnings this far is that it's not just the new funding that counts, but how we reprogram existing projects, funds, and partnerships with a more nature-based lens, with a more systematic a biodiversity climate change link.
Yeah, I'm going to bring Krista back into the conversation. I want you and Krista to ask each other the most difficult question, right? The question that you don't want to be asked about what is the biggest challenge. Krista, ask Per. Well, let's do the reality check. What is the biggest challenge? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, that it's so important to get all the sectors involved, and not only to the protection of nature, what we are doing in Finland now actually more than ever before, but it's even more important that we get all the sectors involved. And I want to ask that how we can do it, because it's not so easy job.
It's so hard. Per,
and so I'd ask you, Per, how you gonna do it?
Well, Krista, thank you first for the cooperation that Sweden and Finland has on bringing the green agenda, the economic and the nature agenda into the Building Back Better approach, which I think is very much needed. And we do so also together inside of the European Union collaboration and so on. I think what is most difficult is the short-term versus long-term perspective of bringing in new investors, for example. We need the big financial institutions, banks and corporations to invest also with green bonds and in biodiversity. So a challenge is for us to show with a trustworthy economic model how that is better for them in economic speaking terms than a more short-term investment, for example, in a fossil energy or things that would continue to break or lead to even more deterioration of biodiversity. So the short-term versus long-term perspective is one of the hardest, I think. And the second one, if I may.
You have to ask Krista a tough question now. She asked you a really tough one. Ask her a tough one, like a really tough question.
No, Krista, one of our challenges that I think you could help me answer is how do we get people on board? Because sometimes investing in nature, in biodiversity, is very far away from people. And it might not be a direct link in Sweden and Finland to people's everyday life, and investing in biodiversity and ecosystems in another part of the planet or close to home. So how do we get people on board and create that connection between us as humans and the planet as a planet?
I must say that I nowadays I see that people are more and more involved, and I'm very happy on that. The climate question, the climate change has been really like people are talking about it. people want to do things for that. All the business, municipalities, communities are very active. And luckily now it's going to be the same with the biodiversity. And I think one reason is because the climate change and biodiversity are so linked to each others. So people understand that we really need to take care of the nature, take care of the biodiversity. And I think it's coming there, and especially the young people are very active, and education is very important on that. So that's one of the key elements.
Krista and Per, we could swap places any day. You did a fantastic job asking much tougher questions than I would have even thought about. I know why you are now in government. Thank you for representing Sweden. Thank you for representing Finland. And thank you for showing us perhaps the way ahead, how you are doing it, how you may well be able to advise other countries to do the same. Appreciate you. Many thanks.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We move on now. Bold action. Where should we start with that? Let's start in Montreal with the Mayor of Montreal. So what you're about to hear in this next section are different cities, different countries, different regions taking bold action to create more biodiversity for their local communities, for their national communities. And so we're going to start with the Mayor of Montreal.
Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Je suis Valérie Plante, mairesse de Montréal et ambassadrice mondiale d'ICLEI pour la biodiversité locale. Nous vivons présentement une situation où les crises reliées à la santé, à la nature et au changement climatique sont étroitement reliées. Les populations en milieu urbain sont en effet confrontées à l'impact de la pandémie, des changements climatiques et de la perte de biodiversité. Mais face à ces défis, les villes sont en mode action et mettent de l'avant des solutions créatives afin de rétablir nos milieux naturels et renforcer le lien entre les citoyennes et les citoyens et la nature. Par exemple, les villes créent des corridors, des parcs, des espaces verts, des murs et des toits végétalisés, plantent des arbres et aménagent des jardins, réallouent leur budget et investissent dans des infrastructures vertes et bleues, intègrent la nature dans leur plan de développement. Ces actions tracent la voie vers un développement en harmonie avec la nature. Elles permettent à la nature de reprendre ses droits dans la ville et permettent aux animaux, insectes et plantes de proliférer. De même, la protection de la biodiversité et la restauration de nos milieux naturels, tels les rivières, milieux humides et forêts, permet à nos villes de devenir plus résilientes. Enfin, le tout facilite le contact entre les humains et la nature et améliore notre qualité de vie. I would like to underline that the actions taken by cities have a global impact. Cities will continue to mobilize and take action, and I invite you to look at the Cities with Nature platform to see how we share best practices and inspire each other. Rest assured that cities also intend to work with all levels of government and other stakeholders towards a successful COP15 and an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework. We need to intensify our collective action now and plan for the future so as to ensure a green recovery and healthy future for all within planetary boundaries. Thank you.
When we think of a safety net, a physical one, we think of something secured not in one spot, but many. We require the strongest materials for its construction. After all, our lives may depend upon it. This is the same of society's other nets, such as social safety net, protecting the most vulnerable amongst us. We require no less of a nature-based planetary safety net. In many ways, we must catch up. We are facing a climate emergency, and humanity continues to poison the air, earth, and ocean. Ideally, one begins building a safety net before an emergency happens. But the person on the proverbial tightrope is falling towards us right now. We must work quickly. Our planetary safety net must be woven with material that will make it strong, secure, and comprehensive, with strands that incorporate climate change protection, biodiversity protection, soil and drought protection, protection of our oceans, and much more. The three conventions that combine these elements must likewise work together to help build this net. In many ways, this was the original idea in Rio, when the three conventions were created. That vision has proven to be correct. Today, as Earth faces challenges on so many fronts, all exacerbated by a global pandemic, never has it been more important that we align our efforts even more strongly than before. Yet, the urgency with respect to finding solutions in these challenging times provide an opportunity. It is our responsibility, in fact, to underline words of collaboration with action. UN Climate Change stands ready to work with you, with all people, to build the strongest and most secure planetary safety net possible. After all, our lives may depend upon it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, in this past week, probably in this last month, you may have heard of the Great Green Wall. It's a project that stretches from West Africa across to East Africa. It's a project that is near and dear to the heart of the Executive Secretary, the Secretariat of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Thank you for joining us today. There appears to be a problem with that video, so we are going to move on. And then we're going to move on. I'm just going to speak quite a long time so that we know we're going to jump that video and then go to Francis Ogwell and Basil Van Haaf. They did a double header together. Thank you. They're co-chairs of the post-2020 process for the next global biodiversity framework. Francis and Basil, you're up.
Hello. My name is Basil Van Haaf, and I am here with my co-chair, Francis Ogwell of Uganda. We're the co-chair of the Convention on Biological Diversity Open-Ended Working Group on the development of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework.
Although there has been progress made in implementation of the Aichi biodiversity targets, the findings in the recently released GBO5 report show that taking action now and in the future is crucial. First, we need to challenge ourselves to make sustainable choices. And second, we need to hold each other accountable for all our actions. All stakeholders, including governments, partners in biodiversity conservation, and the public, should make decisions that will not only benefit biodiversity, but overall human well-being.
The 2020 Aichi targets are now but a milestone. Moving forward, we need to be determined to go beyond them. Only together, we can set a path to meet the 2050 vision for biodiversity, where we live in harmony with nature. To meet the vision, we're currently leading negotiations between 196 parties of the CBD to develop an ambitious post-2020 biodiversity agenda. This will establish the blueprint for the recovery of biodiversity over the next decades and beyond. The devastating effects from COVID are reaffirmed that nature is life and that human life is not without nature. This week's Nature for Life Hub, and particularly today's event on creating a nature-based planetary safety net, is an opportunity for all of us to continue the momentum for biodiversity and to promote the One Health model.
Basil and I wish you the best for this virtual Nature Hub. We hope that through your insights, collective knowledge, and conservation, you will amplify a message that strengthens our collective effort for nature. Thank you.
And thank you. We're looking at bold action, and we're looking at different sectors of how you can get that bold action from different parts of our society. So community action, right-based approaches. Hindu Ibrahim Umara is a coordinator of the Association of Pure Women and autochthonous people of Chad. Hindu, great to have you.
Indigenous peoples have a long history living in harmony with nature. Protecting Mother Earth is our way of life, and we take care of our ecosystem that give us back food, medicine, shelter, and so much more. In the middle of the COVID-19 crisis, we all need to realize that if we protect nature, she protects us back. It is essential for our health, our climate, our agriculture, to stop the loss of biodiversity and end all pollutions. Thanks to our indigenous people's traditional knowledge, we can contribute to protect the forests, the savannas, the oceans, the mountains, and all our ecosystems. Our traditional knowledge may come from the past, but they are key for a better future for all of us. They must be in the heart of green recovery.
For bold action from countries, who do we look to? In this particular segment, we're going to go to Germany.
Ladies and gentlemen, 2020 was supposed to be a super year for biodiversity, culminating in the CBD conference in Kunming. But 2020 instead became a year of fighting the pandemic for all of us. This was and continues to be necessary because the coronavirus pandemic has led to many problems and social injustices around the world. However, the economic recovery after the lockdown offers the opportunity to break with old habits. The pandemic was underscored once again the fact that biodiversity and intact nature protect us from diseases and can have healing impacts. This puts new energy and arguments at the disposal of biodiversity. Biodiversity gives us clean air and water. It provides us with food, building materials, and clothing. It creates jobs and livelihoods. Nature conservation thus actively prevents pandemic. It is our life insurance. The 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties to the Convention of Biological Diversity, CBD COP15, next year, must put a halt to global biodiversity loss. The new global framework must be strong enough to set fundamental changes in motion. This means ambitious new goals for conserving biodiversity, good conditions for implementing these goals swiftly and thoroughly, and regular review of implementation. This is the only way to make the necessary course correction. It is especially important for the global framework to bring capital flows and investments in line with nature. This would send a strong, needed message to the economic and financial world to incorporate the preservation of biodiversity in business models and investment decisions. However, the message would also be addressed to all governments. It is our task to rethink how we use our financial resources. This includes, for example, dismantling subsidies that are harmful to nature. The resources we put into these kind of subsidies are still many times what we put into conserving biodiversity. Let's work together to see the world safely out of the coronavirus. Let's keep up the efforts to the battle against the destruction of nature. Let's come together and create a healthy planet for the benefit of our own generation and those to come. Thank you for your attention.
And thank you. You may remember, if you were with us just a little bit earlier, that we have a scribe for this session. Our scribe is Eleanor Beer. She hears, she sees what we're talking about, and then she illustrates it. Just having a little peek to see what she's doing. The reason I'm just having a peek is because scribing and talking at the same time, it's really tricky. We will come back to Eleanor in a little bit. I'm going to bring in some extraordinary visionary leaders. I hope I'm not hyping them up too much, because I want you to meet them, because what we're trying to do in this little section, we want to pick their brains. It's like, what do we need in place in order to achieve this nature-based planetary safety net? What do we need? I want you to meet the three people who have ideas. I'm just going to ask them straight away. Ambassador Peter Thompson is a UN Special Envoy on Oceans. Carlos Manuel Rodriguez is the CEO of the Global Environment Facility. And also we have Alice Ruessa, Director of WWF Africa. Oh my goodness, what a brain trust we have in the three of you. All right, where shall we start? Ambassador Peter, if you had to say, this is what you would do, from my perspective, to be ready for taking on the challenge of having a planetary nature-based safety net, what would you tell us? What would you share with us as an example?
Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up, Femi, if you can hear me.
Do you know, for you, Ambassador, I'm going to give you 2 thumbs up.
I'm going to take my glasses off, otherwise people won't be able to tell me apart from Carlos. Hey, look, the first thing I'd say is I think the establishment over the years has always left out the most important part of that question, which is, what's the ocean's role in all this? 90% of life on Earth is within the ocean, but you can go to conference after conference, whether it's climate or biodiversity, and not even hear the word ocean being spoken. My first initial point is recognize reality, and reality is that this is a blue planet, not a green planet. So in response to your question, I would say the most important thing for me going forward is that we have a blue-green recovery approach to the covered pandemic. When we start rebuilding, as we will soon, that we make sure that the ocean is part of that. And when we look at what is that blue-green recovery road, practical things like building offshore wind farms. We can supply over 18 times the amount of electricity the world needs from offshore wind farms. So where are the windmills? It's about sustainable aquaculture. We know that there are new forms of food out there, non-fed aquaculture, but also new forms of protein that we can derive from the ocean. So let's invest in that. And let's stop giving subsidies to industrial fleets to go out and chase diminishing fish stocks. Look, I could go on, obviously, but you better shut me up because the others are going to speak as well.
Thank you, Ambassador. Love this. Alice, I really want to tap into your perspective here. Really, what we are doing is we are picking the brains of these visionary leaders. Alice, what would you say? How would you guide us from your perspective? What do you know that you can share with us about how do we get there? How do we get this planetary safety net that we don't have already?
Thank you, Femi. Can you hear me?
Oh, loud and clear.
Good. Yes, like everyone, I'm inspired by what I have been hearing this week, the collective ambition towards nature from youth, from indigenous groups, from heads of state this afternoon. And I think the question on everyone's mind, like you say, is how do we translate this into action? And for me, 3 things. The first one is language. I keep hearing from where I sit here in the field that our language is not resonating very well with everyone. They say we treat nature as a scarce resource that we need to hold on to and protect because it's threatened, and rightly so. But at the same time, they say, what if you sell it as an abundant resource that everyone can come in and invest and get returns on investment, whether it's for food, whether it's for energy or for culture? The second one for me is we need to engage our citizens. We do make the national biodiversity plans and the national climate plans, but I don't think our citizens understand enough about what we are saying. And this is also related to language. What if we translated these commitments into language which our citizens can understand? And then they, in turn, can hold the leaders accountable. They can ask the leaders to report regularly on what is the status of that commitment that you made today. You promised a plastic ban. Where is it and where are we today? And for me, the final point is about collaboration. This is not new. but it's about us collaborating. Are we really, truly collaborating? The people here in the field think we're not collaborating enough. They're getting mixed messages. So think about a soccer field, 11 players working together, pushing that ball towards that goal. We need to think about that. What play are we going to execute to get us there? I think one inspiration I have today is the Global Goal for Nature, which WWF and 15 other organizations have signed to create a shared understanding about what is needed to get us there.
Yeah.
And if we can really collaborate, I believe we can lead to that nature positive, that carbon neutral, that
Alice,
equitable future that we're looking
thinking
for.
about collaborating, we better bring in Carlos. He's been
Yes.
very quiet there. Carlos, this is what you do. This is what Jeff does. I mean, you have to have your blueprint ready. What would you share from your blueprint with the rest of us?
Well, I think that two things are really important and strongly complement with what Peter and Alice just mentioned, which are key elements here to create this, this safety net. One for me, coming from a tropical country, which it has to do with good governance. We now got on board the private sectors, our global leaders, and we need to really walk the talk. How do we do that? How do we materialize that? And a lot has to do with key elements, which are the enabling conditions of good governance at the country level. And this is not just a country high on moral and ethical principles. It's the implementation of the rule of law. It's the respect of private property. It's transparency. It's accountability. It's respect of human rights. It's respect to the rights of nature. And within good governance, there's another element which is key to me, which is I will call it policy coherence.
Yeah.
There are governments, most of the governments of the planet are really convinced that we need to protect nature, but those same governments consistently invest in subsidizing, like Peter just mentioned, sectors, or investing in activities that generate loss of nature and contributes to, deforestation of climate change. So we need to generate more policy coherence as we change the institutional framework. Today, most governments have organized themselves into agencies that work on sector. That means that they work on silos. And we need to break the silo effect, be able to redefine the institutional framework. We shouldn't have agencies that work with renewable natural resources and non-renewable natural resources. We don't need agencies that just work on pieces of the landscape. We need to do the holistic approach. Those two elements are key in this context.
Carlos, Alice, Peter, thank you very much for allowing us to pick your brilliant brains. Really appreciate you. Now, I hope they won't be upset if I say that Carlos, Alice, and Peter are not the youngest people in our session, but I am looking forward to introducing the voice of the youth, because if they're not here, we have no future. They are our future. Let's have a listen to the youth angle of creating our planetary safety net.
Dear world leaders, we'd like to bring to your attention the countless examples of youth-led action and leadership around the world for nature, for climate, and for people.
From Africa to Asia, USA to Europe, Latin America to Pacific, we have walked the talk.
We have stood up as youth leaders and activists and protested against corporations seeking to decimate the world's rainforests. We have started and run sustainable initiatives, creating green jobs for ourselves, our communities, and for the future.
We, the youth of the world.
We, the youth of the world,
have courageously opposed the extractive systems harbored in capitalism and built inclusive, locally sustainable, and thriving economies.
We've started and run sustainable initiatives creating green jobs for ourselves, our communities, and the future.
But we have done all these despite lack of political goodwill, at times or risk of corporate capture. Our generation has seen many of the promises of the Millennium Development Goals, the Aichi biodiversity targets, and the Kyoto Protocol fail. Greenwashing and tokenizing use in the nature-based solutions discourse has become the new escapist tool for big oil and multinationals to continue on business as usual.
And we say no, enough is enough, and we are watching you.
To create a nature-based planetary safety net, we must commit to both nature-based solutions and to rapid decarbonization. Now, more than ever, nature needs us to pay attention to its warning signs.
Remembering that nature-based solutions is not a standalone solution. Together, we stand for nature. The question is, are you with us?
Polluters must not co-opt the term for polluting. Only bailouts for people and nature to build back better.
Corporations must not take advantage of Indigenous or frontline communities or their territories.
Do not separate local communities from nature. Use their wisdom and knowledge to build back better. Ground your decisions and actions in justice, backed by modern science and respecting people's rights.
Actions on sustainability must be based on the principle of intergenerational equity, encouraging justice between generations as well as within generations.
Let youth drive the new decade of ecological transition and the post-2020 biodiversity framework. We are the future, and the future is now for nature.
Together, we stand for nature.
Together, we stand for nature.
Together, we stand for nature.
Question is, are you with us?
Nature for life. Nature needs youth.
From the transformative power of youth to the transformative power of business. Our final conversation with business leaders who can actually help us focus on how do we transform what we're doing right now, business as usual, into what we should be doing, because they're already doing it. We have Rémi Roux, the CEO of Agence Française de Développement, the AFD. We have Brice Rocker from the Rocher Group, and also Rebecca Moore, Director of Google Earth. Now, who's looking ready for action? Rebecca, transformation. Where would you want to take us? Where would you want to push us in the direction of transformation? What would you say that you know that Google was already doing that the rest of the world should be doing too?
You know, this question about data, right? We hear about the power of data to bring transformation. And yet we also hear from decision makers that they're drowning in data, but thirsty for insights. There's a lot of data available, but it's often not in an actionable form to drive high quality decisions. So if you look at biodiversity and nature-based solutions, currently only a handful of countries actually have spatially explicit plans, which is another way of saying detailed maps, to submit to the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. Many others are trying to do this, but they're struggling to get access to the right data. So there's an opportunity to have a much more complete, accurate, and timely picture of the state of our changing planet, including the state of nature. And really, it's with the advent of modern comprehensive Earth observing missions, such as NASA's satellite, Landsat satellite, the ESA Copernicus mission, together with cloud computing and AI, we can now turn those pixels from space to knowledge globally and like in near real time and make that accessible immediately to decision makers. It's like, I think of it as having a Hubble telescope that's pointed back at Earth. And for more than a decade, our Google team has been focused on developing advanced technologies such as Google Earth Engine, together with partnerships to address global environmental issues with locally actionable data in order to drive real-world outcomes such as reducing deforestation, improving access to clean air and clean water, and restoring sustainable fisheries. And through these partnerships, including with UN agencies and member states, we've seen successes, such as Global Fishing Watch is helping to establish new marine protected areas and restore more healthy fisheries in countries such as Indonesia. So just to wrap, I think a challenge of all this is this type of novel, modern data is considered non-traditional or alternative. and it's not always accepted by authorities, such as the UN and member states. And so that's what we would like to advocate, is accept and even embrace these innovative new data sources to provide high quality.
Rebecca is coming back. There is so much more Rebecca to have today in our Global Ambition Day. Rebecca, I'm going to put a pause on that for now. Bree, your team said, ask him where he is. He's in nature. Let him humble brag about where he is. So, where are you in nature and why?
Well, I'm in Brittany, in a small village called Legacy, where my family comes from, in fact. And it's also the land where we have our factories and so many employees. So I'm going to spend a week here with them. It's the family place, I would say. It's and it's probably the best play to be right now, because to come back on the question, I do believe that for a company, it has to be a mission-driven company today and tomorrow, and the mission should be linked to the DNA, to the roots of the company, but also to a current challenge. And the mission of our group is to reconnect people to nature. And the reason why, it's mainly because it has to be with the experience of my grandfather. In fact, my grandfather had he always knew that nature is our future. In fact, was and is our future, and he knew this because at the age of 14, just after his father passed away, my grandfather had an intense experience with nature for 2 years. As a consequence, he was filled with great sadness, which made him take refuge in the woods. You know, back then we were in the middle of the 40s, so in a small village called Legacy in Brittany. Not so many distractions for a young boy, age 14. And in fact, nature gave him exactly what he was looking for: appeasement, consolation, and protection. To summarize, well-being through a way of life that is more peaceful, healthier, and respectful of the world around us. And this is what we can experience here in Brittany, in Legacy, our local roots, in fact.
Yeah, I'm feeling the peace coming off your screen right now. Remy, finally, for transformation, when I say transformation, and we're looking at the biodiversity as how do we get a framework where businesses and finance and governments are all on board, and citizens, what comes to mind? What did you want to share with us?
I want to share with you that yes, finance is key. We're all preparing, and thanks for CBD for this opportunity. And I remember 2015 when we succeeded in reaching the agreement for Paris and for climate. And we have to do it again. So we need finance to provide the evidence that the transformation is possible. So it means more and more biodiversity conservation projects. We need finance mainstreamed into all financial activities, public and private, and we need, I think, maybe that's my advice, to very closely link climate and biodiversity. This is what we are doing at AFD. We committed that 30% of our climate finance, 6 billion a year, will be nature-based, meaning doubling our contribution to biodiversity. If this becomes somehow the reference, I think we could close collectively a significant part of the gap existing. And if so, I think it will create trust enough within COP15, within the negotiation, to reach as ambitious as possible an agreement by 2021.
Thank you, Remy. Thank you, Bree. Thank you, Rebecca. As we end this session, I want to go to the Ministers of Environment for both Egypt and also for China, because they are going to give us the lift that we need for the next decade. Have a look.
We, the governments of Egypt and China, serve as presidents of the Conference of Parties to the Convention of Biological Diversity for 2028 and 2021. Our leadership bridges the decade of biodiversity and the decade of action.
2020 was supposed to be a super year for nature, with bold decisions and even bolder actions to help bend the curve on nature loss. But COVID-19 had other plans. This year, we are reminded of how fragile our social, economic, and economics are now, of how our planet is really interconnected. The challenges we face today with COVID-19, coupled with the existing global environmental challenges of loss of biodiversity, climate change, desertification, forces us to think and take decisions that put the health of people, animal, and planet collectively, the One Health approach.
We're a pivotal point in history. The decisions we take today, tomorrow, next year, and in the next decade will have profound impacts for the next century and beyond. The future is in our hands, and we cannot fear the future of our children. We can uphold the idea that green is as precious as gold, rebuild green economicals that benefit everyone. This year, on the 75th anniversary of the birth of the United Nations, we are reminded of something else, of how we can come together as many nations and as one planet to tackle our crisis. We are reminded that rapid change is possible at a planetary scale, and that together we can do more than we can do alone.
We have a chance right now to build a planetary response to our planetary emergency, guided by science and data and driven by purpose, targets, and objectives. A chance to transform our economies, our finance systems, our food system, and to reset our relationship with nature. We can catalyze an ecological civilization, one that lives in harmony with nature. But we cannot do this alone. We need everyone to be part of an action agenda for people and the planet. Please join us in standing for nature, for life, by pledging your commitment to the Sharm el-Sheikh Tukumang Action Agenda for people and nature.
But we cannot do this alone. We need everyone to be part of action agenda for people on the planet. Please join us standing for nature, for life, by pledging our commitment to the Sharm el-Sheikh Tukumang Action Agenda for people and for nature.
My penultimate task as moderator for you is to check in on Eleanor Beer, who has been scribing our session. Eleanor, let's see how extraordinary it looks. That is beautiful. That is 90 minutes of work. What's your favorite part, Eleanor?
I don't know, all of it really.
I love the green and the blues. You're doing it in our colors for the Nature for Life Hub. It's really beautiful. We will post that so people can see it and tweet it out as well. Eleanor Beer, great job. Eleanor's still got 2 more minutes worth of work to do. Eleanor, I'll let you get back to work and finish it. Good. That is what our session looked like in Eleanor Beer's head. Now, what did it look like in Elizabeth Mrema's head? Elizabeth is, of course, the Executive Secretary of the CBD. Elizabeth, if you could just give us your closing thought. I'm just going to allow you one, because it is almost virtual break time right here. We're in virtual break time. So I'm in trouble. Elizabeth, and you know the both of us, we can talk. So I'm going to
forever.
Yes, forever. We can talk for the next decade. So I am going to hand it over to you, Executive Secretary. What's the last thought you want to leave us with?
I think clearly these few minutes, three things came out very clear. That the recent reports, bad as they are, they've also shown us, like the Global Environmental Outlook, that progress has been made in a number of areas and countries have taken action. We have seen and heard success stories in this session, but those stories need to be upscaled, need to be globalized to make a difference. We have also heard the commitments, the pledges, clearly underline a whole of government, whole of society in whatever actions which will be taken. To be able to really cut across all stakeholders, ensuring business, finance, government, youth, indigenous peoples, local communities, we need them all. This is the journey for nature and people. And this journey is the journey which ought to lead us to that transformative, action-oriented post-2020 global biodiversity framework. All what has been discussed, we need to see it responded into this action-oriented document. And that framework will just be one. It needs to be enforced and implemented. So we hope all the pledges, all the commitments made, all the nice words we've heard will lead to that implementation of the framework that these same heads of state and government will adopt next year into action on the ground. And that's what we'll be looking forward. Thank you.
Elizabeth Mrema, the Executive Secretary of the CBD, thank you. Thank you for watching and being part of our virtual session. I really appreciate you. The session is now closed.
Another profound thank you to our panelists, moderators, and our keynote speakers. That was an amazing conversation. After a short break, we will resume with our afternoon sessions, diving deeper into large-scale global solutions to move the needle on nature. If you are joining us on social media, head over to natureforlifehub.org to see the full agenda for the rest of the events. We'll see you soon.